Okay, now we're recording.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can start. So, welcome to the lecture on genetically modified food. Why are you laughing?
I'm not laughing. Just listening.
Whoever cuts this, please cut this part and start again. Welcome to my lecture on genetically modified food. I will briefly tell you what is genetically modified food, why is it created, which examples are cited by the opponents and by the supporters, what's the situation of the laws, especially in the United States. We will do a short risk-benefit assessment, and then we will discuss what can be done because it's not going too well with the GM food. So, genetically modified food are crops that have been edited by gene editing. I already told you that can be done with a gene gun, with modified viruses, or also techniques like CRISPR or TALEN. So the crops will possess some new trait. GM food, in most cases, nowadays is used for animal feed, but it can also be used for the consumption by humans. And genetically modified crops are also used for biofuel, but I put that in brackets because then it's not GM food. So, as a global community, we face some challenges nowadays that altogether will lead to a lack of food. First, we have the plant diseases that destroy about 15% of the harvest. We have an overpopulation, so the UN estimates that we will have 9 billion people by 2050, and already we consume 11 billion pounds of food a day. And it's also said that by 2050 the food demand will increase and 70 to 100%. So we will need to choose if we want to intensify or expand agriculture. We are really likely to need more land, more water, more fertilizers and more pesticides. The third global challenge is the climate change, which already nowadays leads to less fertile areas, a shift of the fertile regions, droughts, floods, damaging storms, really hot days, or simply quick changes in the climate. Also spread of insects and diseases into new areas is a serious problem. So how could genetically modified food help us with this? Actually, it's quite a long list. We could engineer plants to have significantly higher yields, to bind their nitrogen from air. Nitrogen is the main component of a normal fertilizer, but normal plants cannot use the nitrogen that's in the air. Crops could be resistant to salt, or resistant to drought, or just somehow adapt quickly to climate change. We could also engineer crops that are resistant to insect infestation, or some other pathogens, or simply crops that are resistant to herbicides. So somehow we aim at engineering crops that require less resources. Whenever it comes to genetically modified food, we come across lots of different conflicting interests. We have the humanitarian organizations that just somehow want to tackle these global challenges and, for example, want to end hunger. We have the farmers that are primarily interested in higher yield and better quality of their own crops. We have the companies that aim at profit in their business, of course. We have the environmental activists that want to protect the biodiversity and want to encourage sustainable agriculture. And we have us, the normal consumers, that just want to know that the food they are eating is safe, and in normal cases also want to be informed about what they are eating if it's possible. Especially between companies and environmental activists, we have a huge conflict of interest. So whenever you yourself do some research on GM crops. Just do not simply believe what you read, but always check what's the motivation for this text, because you will surely come across some propaganda in this field. So, but who is able to develop genetically modified food? Genetic engineering is quite expensive, so you would have to spend between $25 and $100 million per trade. So most humanitarian organizations, farmers or consumers don't have this money and also don't have the know-how to do this, which means we just have two players that could possibly genetically modify food. On the one hand side, independent institutes that have some other source of funding, for example, stable funding, and we have the companies. And they are the ones that have been commercializing and engineering food so far, with three major traits. So they have plants that produce a pesticide to repel insects, plants that are resistant to viruses, or plants that are resistant to herbicides. So on the global food market, we have these players. We have 570 million farmers. We have, on the other hand side, 7.5 billion consumers, and it's all controlled by these three companies: Bayer Monsanto, China Syngenta, and DuPont Dow. So those are the three main agro seed companies. I'm going to focus more on Monsanto in this lecture, simply because they own 90% of the genetically modified organisms that are grown on this planet. Monsanto is the main agrobiotechnology company. It was founded in 1901 by John Francis Queeny as a chemical company at first, but it was involved in different areas of research. For example, it was also involved in the development of the first nuclear weapon, and during the history they developed different products that are now known to be highly toxic. For example, aspartame, or some hormones that would cause a cow to give more milk, which in the end had negative side effects on the cow and also on the quality of the milk it would give. They produced the Agent Orange that was applied in the Vietnam War and still has strong health effects on the people in Vietnam. So this is basically a list of different scandals that this company was involved in, and nowadays they are turning to food. What do we have on the market so far? In total, we have 117 hectares of transgenic food worldwide. So of all the soybeans that are grown on the planet, 81% are genetically modified so far. For corn, it's 35%, and also cotton is often genetically modified. So in India, 96% of the cotton is modified. 99% of the genetically modified crops that are on the market are either resistant to herbicides or to pathogens, and as I already told you, they are mainly used for animal feed, biofuels or cooking oils. There was also done some research on rice, wheat and potatoes, but it's not yet widely grown due to public opposition. The three main promoting countries of biotechnology, food biotechnology, are the United States, Argentina and Brazil. Let's see what's the first negative example. So what do opponents claim what's not going well with genetically modified food? I'm going to talk about glyphosate. Have you heard about that name? No? Okay. So it's a total herbicide, which means it can just kill any plant. It's derived from glycine, and it blocks the inyl pyrovyl shikimate 3-phosphatase synthase, which is a crucial enzyme in the pathway that synthesizes aromatic amino acids, vitamins and hormones. So this shikimate pathway is present in plants, bacteria and fungi, but not in higher animals, which is why people claim that glyphosate is less harmful to humans than other pesticides. also, the World Health Organization in 2015 stated that glyphosate does provoke cancer. So yes, and because this pathway is highly conserved throughout the plant kingdom, glyphosate is able to kill any plant. Okay, but now you may ask me, what does this have to do with genetically modified food? Okay, so Monsanto found a gene from a bacteria that just inhibits the effect of glyphosate. So they have a different form of the enzyme that's crucial and normally blocked, and this enzyme can no longer be inhibited by glyphosate. So if they give this gene to a plant, glyphosate cannot affect that plant. So what they do is to sell the herbicide, glyphosate, with a trait name Roundup, together with the plants, the Roundup ready plants. In most cases it's soybeans. And they can sell it together, so the farmers can plant the Roundup ready soybeans and just spray everything with the herbicide. All weeds will die, but their plant will survive. Which sounds quite logical. But of course there are some problems attached to this. So for example, it will lead to really careless spraying of the herbicide, because they don't have to care, right? They can just apply it anywhere, at any time of the growing of the plants. And this careless spraying has been reported to produce some negative health effects. For example, if it's sprayed really close to schools or to children, the children will have some skin diseases, some allergies, will not be able to learn as fast as other children. And because you can spray the herbicide also when the plant is already grown, it's really likely that it enters the food chain. Roundup, this herbicide, does not only contain glyphosate but also some other substances that are crucial for the formulation. And these additional components are normally not tasted for the safety. A major drawback is also that the farmers rely on just this one herbicide, because this, over the course of time, creates resistant weed, which will lead to even more herbicide use. Because if you have something, for example a cockroach, and you have your bottle of Raid and you do psh, and it doesn't die, what do you do? Psh, right? Until it's dead. That's how it works, and that's also how the farmers work. Also, it has been reported that the excessive use of herbicides has really negative effects on the soil. Another negative example would be the Bt cotton. Why Bt? Because it's modified with a gene from Bacillus thuringiensis. This cotton produces a protein that destroys the intestinal tract of insects. So the cotton basically just builds its own pesticide, and you do not need, or you should not need, any external application of some additional pesticide. And the substance is supposed to be harmless for humans. Okay, why is this famous among the opponents of genetically modified crops? Because Bt cotton was reported to have even lower yields than the conventionally bred cotton, and a lower quality also. There was a disease that just affected the genetically modified cotton, while the wild type cotton could easily survive it. So this is supposed to have led to an increase in the suicide rates of Indian farmers. But of course Monsanto denies this. Suicide among Indian farmers is quite common, because the poverty is just too extreme and they get into debt and they don't know how to feed their families, and that's their way out of this crisis. Also, environmental activists are really concerned with negative influence of bees or other insects from this pesticide that's produced inside the crop itself. So why is the public opinion in many cases not in favor of genetically modified crops? there are lots of promises since the 90s that have not been fulfilled. We have not seen any significant increase in the yields. We don't have deserts that are now green fields of any kind of maize, of rice, whatever. It's known that especially Monsanto does intense lobbying, but this is probably true for all global player companies. We see a concentration of power over the food supplies. People are afraid of negative effects on the environment. Also, the safety testing of genetically modified crops might not be sufficient. We have the vague argument of unnaturalness. And people see a threat to biodiversity. So the intuitive reaction, I guess, is to just dismiss all GMOs together. Also, this might not always be the best thing. So this is the most famous example of people that support genetically modified food. It's golden rice. As you might know, there's a big problem with vitamin A deficiency, especially in Africa, but also and India, but also in other developing countries. And deficiency in the vitamin A leads to blindness, disruption of the development of bones, or just simply disturbances of the metabolism as a whole. So what researchers did was to use rice, which is the staple food in many of the poorer regions of the world, and introduced a gene to produce beta-carotene, which is a precursor of vitamin A. So if you ingest this rice, your body will produce its own vitamin A from this. They patented it, but they don't raise any fees for the use of golden rice unless the farmers gain more than $10,000 from this, which is why this project was awarded the Patents for Humanity Award in 2015. There's also a follow-up project where they want to enter even more micronutrients into rice. But the opponents of even this project say that that's not a solution, that we should give people access to a balanced nutrition and fight poverty, of course, instead of just fighting this symptom of vitamin A deficiency. So the question is it a show project? So is it really what one example of what genetically modified food could do and how could it make the world better? Or is it just a Trojan horse to make people accept genetically modified food and then enter with all the negative sides to the market? There are also other success stories. For example, in 2013, a genetically modified eggplant was introduced in Bangladesh. It also produced this Bt protein I already told you about, and we could see in this case 80% reduction of pesticide use, and the health of the farmers also increased due to this. And in the 1990s, the ring spot virus threatened the Hawaiian papayas, so genetically modified papaya came to save the papayas of Hawaii. It worked quite fine. Nevertheless, Hawaii banned genetically modified organisms in 2013, but just on the Big Island, and except for the papayas they already had, and just until 2015. Interestingly, Monsanto actually sued Hawaii for this. Yes, they said, okay, this law that you're making will damage our business, so yes.
So we're going to sue you.
Yes, it's a company against the state. It's really interesting. Another example is a potato that's resistant to blight, which is a potato disease. It's developed in Ireland, and they used a gene from a resistant potato in South America. And it's sterile, so you cannot see any cross-contamination. But the researchers that did this claimed they just wanted to know, okay, how does blight affect the genetically modified potato, and how will it affect the soil microbes? Because they know they cannot launch it to the European market because it will not be accepted. I think they are launching it in the United States though. So what if we look at other traits? Since 2003 we have been promised some drought-resistant genetically modified crops, and it was always this feeling of okay, soon it's going to happen. And yes, actually it happened. So Monsanto released the first drought-resistant corn in 2013 or 2014. But in the time that they were developing one genetically modified crop that's resistant to drought, by conventional breeding, 153 non-genetically modified corn species or varieties were created. So keep this in mind when we compare breeding and genetic modification. So what's wrong with the laws concerning genetically modified organisms? Well, first of all, the company itself proves the safety of the product they are selling. I mean, it's somehow logical because it saves the state a lot of money and administration. And if it's good science and the company gives the state access to all data that they obtain, why not? Maybe we can discuss that later also. Secondly, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, established in 1993 the principle of substantial equivalence. So they would say the safety of genetically modified food can be assessed by comparing it to a similar food proven safe in normal use over time. So if you take, for example, a potato, people have been consuming potatoes for centuries and nothing happened, so we can say, okay, a potato is generally regarded as safe. It has this breast status, right? Also, what have humans also been consuming over centuries and nothing has ever happened? DNA, because DNA is always in our food. So, if we combine a potato with DNA, it also should be generally regarded as safe, right?
Oh. Nice logic.
That's very plausible. Okay, but that's how things are seen, so...
Legally, that's how things
are. That's the translation of this principle. So yes, which is how they justify that they do a reduced effort of testing for GM foods. And last week, Trump also signed a new executive order that even reduces the regulations on genetically modified food even more, also concerning export and other things. Okay, but to say something in favor of this legislation, also the safety of a conventional diet was never been proven safe. I mean, there are some people that will ingest, for example, a lot of meat, which is more likely to provoke cancer, and there are people that maybe live a more healthy life on the other hand side. So it also would be really difficult to design an experiment to show that there are no long-term effects of genetically modified food or even normal food. Again, we come across the topic of patents. So imagine you're an organic farmer and you say, I don't care that everyone else has genetically modified food around me. I'll have my 50-meter buffer zone and I'll be fine and I'll have an organic harvest and be able to sell it more expensive than the conventional harvest. But now some GM pollen from your neighbors does come on your field. So you will just, if someone notices it, you can only achieve a lower price for this, right? Because your harvest is no longer organic. So, but instead, that you go to court and tell someone, hey, you guys contaminated my harvest, you're the one with the bad luck, because the seeds that came over to contaminate your field were patented. So what you did was patent infringement by growing patented seeds without paying for it. So basically you will be the one that's drawn to court and has to pay in the worst case. So this is again, we should remember this point from my previous presentation also. You cannot patent any bred seeds, but you can patent genetically modified seeds. So in the traditional way of farming, farmers just keep a certain portion of their seeds and use them again next year. But Monsanto does not allow this, so they even established something that's by some farmers called gene police. So they will have an attorney that just comes and talks to you, like, hey, did you pay for everything that you're seeding this year? Or they will take some samples without your permission in some cases even from your field and check for the genes that they have patented. They will also like say, okay, if you notice something strange on the field of your neighbor, here's my number. So yes, which leads to the fact that farmers have to buy new seeds every year. And Monsanto is also developing a terminated technology, which in my opinion would solve some problems, because this technology implies that the genetically modified seeds cannot be reseeded in the next year because the seeds will be sterile. But this technology was rejected due to public opposition. But I mean, the farmers have to buy new seeds every year anyway, so who cares if they could theoretically reseed them or not. So let's have a look at the risk-benefit assessment. We have to take into account, as always, the motive, the action that we would perform, and the result we obtain. So we can have a motive to make the world a better place, to solve some of the global challenges, to end hunger, whatever, or to just earn more money. In both cases, we'll perform genetic engineering. I guess we'll focus more on the evaluation and testing of the genetically modified crops if we really want to solve problems. In the second case, it's not that important for us. So the result could either be a problem-solving plant or a pretty expensive tomato. But in order to do this risk-benefit assessment, let's compare genetic modification and breeding. So one of the main arguments that you hear often is that genetic engineering is a lot faster than breeding, which is, as I have shown you with the drought-resistant plants, surely not always the case. Genetically engineered seeds can be patented, they cannot be reseeded, and genes from any organism can be entered, whereas in breeding you can just have genes from closely related plants. The responsibility for the product lies with the companies in this case, and in the case of breeding it lies either with the farmers if they do breed them themselves, or also with the companies which also just sell conventionally bred seeds. Genetic engineering is far more expensive than normal breeding, so we maybe should rethink the statement that genetic engineering is just breeding 2.0, which is also one of the arguments that we often hear from the supporters of genetically modified food. Which risks do we see for GM food? There could be a monopoly on food. We already see an increase in the gap between poor and rich people, whereas at the same time no additional work is created by this company. I was told yesterday that there's one guy employed for Monsanto Serbia. Genetics might not fulfill their expectations. So even biotechnologists are not so sure if we will ever see the plants we are promising for decades now. And for the herbicide-resistant plants, we see that we have a resistance of the wheat that's emerging and a growing use of herbicide and other chemicals. There is definitely uncontrolled spreading. So for Mexico, it has been reported that genetically modified corn entered the markets and the fields without people wanting it. Also in Paraguay, they suddenly realized they had lots of genetically modified soybeans, and they just had to legalize it afterwards because it was already a reality. And this leads also to a diminishing of the natural varieties, either because genetically modified food is strongly promoted on the market. In the example of Mexico again, the United States are just exporting corn, that genetically modified corn, of course, that's like half of the price of the local corn, so people will turn to the genetically modified corn. But also because farming is just done with these limited varieties of genetically modified organisms, and because of the negative effects on bees and other insects also. We still see some side effects. So, for example, we don't know why this BT cotton was susceptible to diseases that did not affect the wild type. And we also don't know why we still need to spray even if we use BT cotton in India. The location of the transgene can have big effects. So this is an example. These two plants have the same genome, okay, totally the same genome, just the location of the transgene. It's the only difference. And you can see that the form of the petals is strongly different in these two cases. So we definitely still have some unknown mechanisms in this procedure. So, but what interests us as consumers most, are GMOs safe to eat or not? There are some risks that are less likely and some that are more likely. So I think it's not really likely that you express a gene of a genetically modified organism you ate, because we already consume a lot of DNA and this doesn't happen too often. But what could happen is that you show some chronic inflammation or other long-term reactions, maybe even cancer, to proteins that are expressed by the genetically modified organisms and digested by us. So, but this is really hard to examine. Like, where should you get a control group? For example, in the United States, genetically modified food is so far spread already. And people don't even know when they are consuming it or not, because it's not labeled. And there are big campaigns against labeling genetically modified food. So basically you cannot know, okay, who consumes it and who not. If you work with animals, you have to take into account the normal life expectancy of animals, and you also don't know what's a normal dose of a tomato, for example. Maybe someone doesn't like it and just eats one in a month, and another one really loves it and eats 3 tomatoes a day. And how is this food prepared prior to ingestion? Is it cooked? Is it raw? What's done with it? So it's difficult to obtain reliable data, and maybe that's one of the reasons why we see a lot of contradictory studies. So we will see some studies that claim that GM food is provoking cancer, and some studies that claim that it's totally safe. And both sides just accuse each other of using bad science, of course. You could see an increasing antibiotic resistance of gut bacteria, because when we genetically modify something, we normally use an antibiotic marker. So we use some antibiotic resistance for us in the laboratory to check if the transformation worked, if the gene that we wanted to insert is inserted. And if these antibiotic-resistant genes are transferred, for example, to gut bacteria, we can see some problems in this case. What we already see are severe damages caused by the extensive use of herbicides, and also herbicides in the food chain. And one of the most quoted serious challenges is allergenicity. So it's a famous example that you could kill someone with allergy towards peanuts, if you just put a peanut gene into a banana. I guess that's possible, but I also guess that companies will take great care, at least at this point, to check that they are not provoking any allergic reaction in their customers. So what are the benefits that we could get out of genetically modified food? We could have high yield improvements. Monsanto promises us 100% increase in yield until 2030. We have not seen it so far, but they still have 13 years, so we don't know. We haven't seen that hunger was ended so far, or any plants that are able to quickly adapt to climate change. Decreasing herbicide use is true in some cases, in others it's just clearly a lie and not happening. Drought-resistant plants are now starting to be on the market, but I already told you that conventionally bred varieties are much likelier to have success in this field. There are also some studies done on salt-resistant plants, but nothing is commercialized yet. What we are doing and what's working well is the resistance of plants against pathogens. So that's the main benefit that we see so far. To conclude, I would say that GM crops could offer potential solutions to global or local challenges, but so far they do not, due to either economic interests or opposing public opinions. Really few companies control this really big and maybe even most important market. And we really would need more reliable information on the safety of consumption, and that for every case where genetically modified crops are applied. Okay. Did you notice what I did not mention so far in this lecture? No. Ethics. So, if a company owns a significant share of the world food supply, they somehow should assume the responsibility attached to this, right? I mean, that's what we would say logically. But can this be achieved? And how could this be achieved? Or is a company and stays a company, so it doesn't have to care about anything at all? So genetically modified organisms are not labeled in the United States, so consumers cannot even know where genetically modified organisms are present and where not. Is this okay, or do we have a right to know what's in our food? How should we as a society react to this situation worldwide somehow? And how could we work on the promises that are made, so on the plants that will grow in the desert and on the plants that have higher yields or more vitamins? So how could we guide science the right way? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves. And now I just want to discuss with you what ideas you have to improve this situation. I listed some things we can take into consideration. Things we could work on. We could check the overpopulation to somehow regulate this, to regulate climate change, to say, okay, we just don't allow any patents on life anymore, to say, okay, science somehow has to be funded differently so they can really work on the things that matter, free from the economic interests of companies. Or should we start to raise the public awareness also for the positive sides that a genetically modified food can have? And in the end, will we accept genetically modified food or not? So this is what I want to know from you now. Where should we work? What should we do? We are young, we can change the world.
In my opinion, the biggest problems are the patents. That we allow the companies to have patents on any genetically modified food. That's the biggest problem, I think.
What do you think is the biggest problem?
monopoly of some companies. I think that's the biggest problem, but we can solve it with some laws. We have here a law against monopoly, but it's not working. But there are states that can make it work, and later it can happen to it can happen in the whole world.
Maybe. I'm writing my to-do list, like what to change in the world.
I agree that the monopoly of the companies is one of the biggest problems, as well as maybe a lack of awareness in public, because it is so hard to get to reliable information on the internet due to what you already mentioned, which is either pro or con kind of propaganda. With this, I think the monopoly thing also drives some other problems, such as because they don't have much competition, they can just I don't know, maybe in a sense that they don't have to try so hard and do all the safety testing, which is probably the most important part you have to do when developing genetically modified organisms and then selling them on the market. And yeah, they don't have to, because they're the only ones who produce it, they don't have to look for alternative ways of developing these plants. A lot of the examples that you mentioned are focused on herbicide or pesticide resistant plants. But both herbicides and pesticides have been proven to be one of the worst ways to battle weed and those other unwanted plants. So maybe we should focus on making the plants more adaptable to conditions that already exist, like salty soils or drought or higher, lower temperatures and stuff like that, and leave the way for some other way of weed contamination to be dealt with.
I think that the focus of the companies also is in these areas, because I told you it was just one gene that was modified in these two cases, so it was really easy compared to other things. For example, the tolerance to salt or to drought is regulated by a bigger network of genes. So that's why scientists are struggling with that still. But yes, I totally agree that we should not rely on herbicides and pesticides.
Yeah, they are toxins at the end of the day.
Exactly.
But the companies, I think, they rely on herbicides and pesticides because they sell those herbicides and pesticides.
Yeah, also,
and
yeah.
they earn money.
Yes.
That's the problem.
It's the double gain for them.
Yeah. Except for people.
Like for me, the biggest problem will be the overpopulation. We're just consuming too much, and if the number of humans increases, it will be a problem, because it will not be just food, it will be basically any resource that we have. Drinking water.
But that's the problem then with all the lectures we've had. Like, we shouldn't ever even implement genetic editing in humans, because we're already overpopulated. We need people to die, we don't need more people to Oh my god.
Maybe you can also do that with genetic engineering. When you're 65, you just drop dead.
Yeah, basically you can do anything, probably.
No, but I want to have a look into that, because I was thinking the same thing. I think we could, for example, solve things if humans could do photosynthesis and just lie in the sun and use their own food. It would be awesome.
That would be a radical change.
It could be one approach. Or to just, you could engineer them to use
Or to develop symbiosis with plants that live on our skin somehow. That would be
Yes.
gross.
No, it would be really nice. I would be happy always.
And it would solve many problems. It would solve many problems. Like, how it's called? Never mind.
You can say this whole good word in so much
Ето като стъкнем баш.
Glass.
Green
Greenhouse.
Greenhouse.
Yes, exactly.
It would solve the problem, definitely.
Yes. I'm in favor of that.
I think one of the weakest arguments against is the biodiversity one, that we're like damaging diversity somehow by including genetically modified plants, because we're already damaging biodiversity by just cultivating certain plants. So whether they're genetically modified or not doesn't really change the fact that we're constantly modifying biodiversity by decreasing it. I think that's really weak. That's what I thought.
But just because we're decreasing it already, it's okay to decrease it even further.
I don't think it's decreasing it even further. I think it's just kind of the next step. We're just, instead of favoring this like type of potato, now we're favoring this other type of potato. It's not really significantly different.
We
is
can
what I have to
also
say.
use it in a different way to bring back some species that
Yes.
are extinct.
Yeah.
Some plants brought back the original tomato that has a greater taste. We already talked about it. So we can make things better on that when we are on that topic.
But with this approach, it's just not likely, because what's happening is that, of course, you have the farmer here that has his genetically modified crops and sprays them heavily with herbicides. So if you have next to it an organic farmer, this field will also suffer from the herbicide. And it's just reported that there's no peaceful coexistence between organic farmers or even people that just have conventionally bred varieties and the genetically modified things. So it's sad that the genetically modified crops always lead to extensive monocultures. But of course, in theory, it's a weak argument. But in practice, I think it has some justification.
In practice, yeah, perhaps, but I think that goes back to we just have to stray away further from herbicide resistance to some other qualities which we can improve.
But how could we do this? I mean, we would have to find either something that motivates someone like Monsanto to work on this,
Yeah.
or we would have
Well, there
to...
are a lot of, I don't have an example in food, but I have been on to a lecture of a woman that's working on one of our institutes in Belgrade that have been examining some characteristics of a certain bacteria that's involved in milk pasteurization, something, I don't remember the exact process that we're testing, but they found some very interesting qualities of that bacteria, and they started their own little company which produces food that is enriched by it and selling it on the market. The point is that some small group of researchers could potentially develop a plant that is, or some other, well, food is mostly plants, but some plants that are better or improved in some way, and then maybe grow or make a contract with some other correspondents, which would then transfer that plant to the market. And they can't at first, of course, rival those huge agricultural companies, but you know, it's a start.
Yeah, I mean, right now the problem in Europe would be that it's not sold because it's genetically modified.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
But yes, I agree. I don't know what it would look like in practice, of course, if you try to say, hey, I have my own thing. But the process will be expensive, I think, if you have to go through all the safety testing criteria and everything. I don't know how long it takes before you can launch it onto the market.
It takes quite a long time.
Yes.
But maybe you could have it state funded or have some sponsors, just like for regular, research projects that are, funded either by state or some institute, or there are even scholarships.
But those researches are quite expensive, and I think, like, right now, this is the easy way out for government to give some company patent to produce to do research and earn money on that genetically modified organism. And they don't want to invest their money for, let's say, greater good of the population. And that's the problem, that the government itself don't want to invest into the research.
Maybe. I just remembered I participated once in iGEM. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a competition of students, and they have to raise their own funding. So we were a team of 10 students, and we had to go to different companies and say, hey, we want to produce this and this, can you give us some money? And this is how we financed our research. And it was also in synthetic biology, so we would create some GMOs. Maybe that could also be one first step. Something like this. Of course, I would not like to eat something that 10 students created somehow.
Yeah, but why? I mean, with conscious testing, if it was tested properly, does it matter who created it?
No, of course not. But that would be the drawback of iGEM, because this competition is just 1 year. So it would be enough to give a starting point, but it would never be enough to go through all the testing procedures that should be required. And that, of course, also will be expensive again.
Yeah, I know for drugs it's, I think, 10-year process to...
Yes, exactly. So what do you think, who should be in charge of testing these new products? Is it fine that the company does it, or should it be the state?
The state.
Yeah, the state.
Someone
impartial, more impartial than the company who will make direct profit from it.
Or some non-government organizations or something like that. But definitely not the company.
Okay, but what if a company now comes and just produces 10,000 of precursors and tells the state, hey, test all of these for me? That's also sort of not manageable, right? And also really expensive for the state. I could imagine states going bankrupt because of that.
Yeah, but states shouldn't have to test everything that they offer them. They could pick just, okay, give us your best or most promising projects and we will test them out. Maybe they could, I don't know.
maybe some inspections inside the companies, I don't know, that just go and use some sample and they don't tell that they're coming to test, so they cannot manipulate the results.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't think that government should test every single plant. It's just silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least, for example, from Monsanto, I've read that they would just like give the data of their safety testing to the FDA, but a lot of the data was just confidential and linked to the secret policy, I don't know what the name is, of the company. So they were like, yes, we tested it, but we cannot tell you the result of it.
It's like such a slimy company, in all honesty. It's a shame that they hold a monopoly on the GM market. And I think that information should definitely be available to the public, but I think states or maybe even those companies should also work on informing the public better, because despite all these very legitimate concerns regarding GM food, most people are against it just probably because of the most ridiculous one, because it's unnatural or whatever. So in that sense, I think people should be more educated on that topic and not refuse it just because it's GM, but also have access to, exact details of the components of the food they're buying.
Yeah. But when it comes to public awareness, I always wonder, like, of course, I think, oh my god, all these bioethic issues are so important, the public has to know about all of them. And then I think, okay, but I guess there are people in maths, or people in, of course, in philosophy, or people in whatever, in social science that say exactly the same thing. So,
no, but this like directly affects their existence, their life. It's you are what you eat, no? This isn't some like theoretical problem or like general knowledge. This is something that is like directly useful to you. So I think this it could be said of course by every science that it's important, but I think in this case it's extremely important because your livelihood depends on it.
maybe. Okay, any other thoughts? Questions? Critics? Wishes? No?
Dimensional moves.
Great, I'm proud of you. Okay, I think then we're done and see you next week.